The morning air was calm, the kind that feels almost too still before a big day. The small-town airport was waking up slowly, with the faint hum of engines and the soft sound of luggage being moved around. Among the few people there was a pilot who always seemed to bring a certain kind of warmth with him wherever he went. He wasn't famous, but people in town knew him well. He was the kind of person who remembered everyone's name and never forgot to ask how their family was doing. He loved flying more than anything. To him, the sky wasn't just a place to work, it was freedom. He often said that flying above the clouds made all of life's problems seem smaller. His passion wasn't about adventure or thrill. It was about purpose. He used his small aircraft to deliver supplies to remote areas where roads were rough and hospitals were far away. That morning, he was getting ready for one of those flights. His mission was simple: carry boxes of medicine and food to a small village in the mountains. He checked every corner of the plane carefully. He always did. His coworkers said he treated his plane like family. Before boarding, he called home. His wife answered, her voice soft but cheerful. She told him breakfast was waiting for him. Even though she knew he had already left early, their little daughter, half asleep, took the phone and mumbled, "Fly safe, Daddy." He smiled quietly. He promised he would. Before hanging up, he took one last photo, him standing beside his plane, wearing his uniform and his favorite cap, smiling wide. One of the mechanics offered to take it for him. "For the family," the mechanic said. The pilot nodded, not knowing how meaningful that picture would later become. As the sun began to rise, he started the engine. The plane rolled forward smoothly, the sound cutting through the silence of the morning. He waved once at the few airport workers and lifted into the air. The sky was painted in soft orange light, and the clouds looked calm like pieces of cotton floating lazily. It felt like a perfect day for flying. He followed his route, crossing fields, rivers, and tiny houses that looked like toys from above. Sometimes he talked to himself, sharing thoughts as if his family could hear him through the clouds.
"I'll be home by evening," he said softly.
"And I'll bring stories from the mountains." He always liked telling stories about the people he met during his flights, about their smiles, their struggles, their hope. But as he flew closer to the mountains, the weather began to shift. The clear sky turned gray and thin clouds started to gather ahead. The air became rough, making the small plane shake slightly. He stayed calm. He had faced worse before. The radio connection remained strong at first, but static began to creep in. He contacted air control to report the change in weather. They advised him to wait at a nearby airstrip, but he wanted to finish his mission before the storm grew worse. The villagers needed those supplies, and he didn't want to disappoint them. Back at home, his wife and parents were busy with their usual day. His daughter drew pictures of planes and colored them in bright blue. The family trusted him completely. Flying was what he did best. The day went on and the hours passed quietly. By evening, when he still hadn't called, his wife started to worry. She checked her phone again and again, hoping for a message. At first, she told herself he might be delayed by weather. But as night fell and no word came, fears started to grow. She tried calling him, but the call didn't go through. The next morning, local authorities called. The plane had lost contact with the tower near the mountains. Search teams were being sent out. The news spread fast in the small town. People who knew the pilot gathered at the airport waiting for updates. His parents arrived too, their faces pale with disbelief. His wife refused to cry at first. She kept saying he was strong, he knew the mountains, he'd come back. But deep inside, she felt a weight pressing against her chest. For the next few days, search and rescue teams combed the mountain range. They found signs of turbulence, pieces of trees broken by wind and parts of the terrain that looked dangerous. But there was no clear sign of the plane. The weather made everything harder. Every morning, the family waited by the phone, hoping for good news, and every evening they went to bed in silence. Neighbors brought food, but no one ate much. The family's house, once full of laughter, felt painfully quiet. The photo of the pilot stood on the table in the living room, right where he had left it before leaving. His wife would sit in front of it and whisper, "You promised to come home." His daughter didn't understand what was happening. She kept asking, "Why isn't Daddy answering his phone?" His parents tried to stay strong, but every night they would sit together and talk about his childhood, about how he had always looked at planes with wonder. They prayed for a miracle, but the days turned into weeks and hope slowly began to fade. After a month, the search was officially called off. No new leads were found, and the storm had erased many signs of what might have happened. The announcement hit the family like a wave. His wife finally broke down, holding the photo to her chest. His daughter sat beside her, watching quietly, too young to fully understand but sensing the pain in the room. The parents didn't speak much anymore. They spent most days sitting near the window, staring at the sky. The town held a small service in the pilot's honor. People shared stories of how he had helped them, flying patients to hospitals, delivering food, and always smiling through it all. There was no body to bury, only the photo that everyone recognized. The same photo he had taken the morning of the flight, where he stood proud and full of life. It became more than just a picture. It became a symbol of love, courage, and loss. That night, after everyone had gone, his wife sat alone by the photo again. She touched the frame and whispered, "You were supposed to come home." She placed a candle beside it and watched the flame flicker. The small light filled the room with a warm glow, almost like he was still there. It became her nightly habit, to light that candle every evening, to feel close to him even if just for a moment. The little girl began to understand slowly. She started talking to the photo too, telling her father about her day, about school, about how she missed his stories. Sometimes she would take the photo and sit by the window, pretending she was flying with him. It broke her mother's heart, but it also reminded her of the bond they still shared. Months went by. The world outside kept moving, but inside the house time seemed frozen. Every corner of the home carried a memory. The jacket he left hanging, the mug he used every morning, the books he loved reading. His parents visited often, bringing flowers and sitting quietly in the living room. No one wanted to move the photo. It stayed right where he had placed it, as if moving it would erase him completely. And yet, even through the sadness, there was something gentle in the air, a strange kind of peace. The photo began to bring comfort instead of pain. It reminded the family not just of what they had lost, but of the love that still remained. They began to speak of him not as someone gone, but as someone who had done what he loved till the very end. They didn't know it yet, but that photo, the one taken just before he left, would soon travel a long way and return to them with a story they could never have imagined. A story that would turn their quiet sorrow into something brighter, something filled with hope. The days after the search ended felt like a blur. The house that was once filled with laughter and the smell of morning coffee now sat in quiet stillness. His wife moved through the room slowly, touching things he had once used. His jacket still hanging by the door, his boots lined neatly by the wall, his favorite mug with a small crack near the rim. She couldn't bring herself to move any of it. It was as if she was waiting for him to walk in and say, "You cleaned up too much while I was gone." But the door stayed closed, and the silence only grew heavier. Their daughter didn't understand much, but she could feel the change. The air felt different, the smiles were fewer, and even the sound of airplanes in the sky made her stop and look up. Sometimes she would grab the photo of her father and say, "He's coming home soon." Her mother would nod gently, never having the heart to say otherwise. The child's innocent hope was the only light that filled the home during those endless weeks. The pilot's parents, who lived nearby, visited every morning. His mother brought flowers, placing them near the photo in the living room. His father sat quietly by the window, his hands clasped tightly together, his eyes distant. He rarely spoke, but when he did, it was always about his son. He told stories about how he used to watch planes as a boy, dreaming of touching the clouds one day. Those stories gave the family a bit of comfort, though each word carried pain beneath it. Life in the town slowly went back to normal, but for the family, time had stopped. Friends and neighbors still visited, bringing food, company, and kind words. But after the first few months, even they began to visit less often. The family didn't blame them. Life had to move on for others. Still, every time the phone rang, a small part of his wife hoped it was someone saying they'd found something. Anything. But the calls were never that. Bills, updates, small talk, and everything but what she wanted to hear. At night, she would sit by the candle near his photo. The flame flickered softly, making the pilot's smiling face come alive in the glow. Sometimes she would whisper about her day, about their daughter, about how much she missed him. It became a ritual, something that made her feel close to him again. His daughter often joined her, bringing her crayons and paper, drawing little planes flying above the mountains. "He's helping people up there," she'd say, her voice full of faith. Her mother would smile weakly, wiping away a tear before it could fall. One evening, the family decided to visit the airport again for the first time since the day he took off. The idea came from his father, who said he wanted to feel close to his son's world again. They went quietly, carrying a bouquet of white flowers. The staff at the airport recognized them immediately. The same mechanic who had taken that last photo of the pilot walked over slowly, his eyes heavy with sympathy. "He was one of the best," he said softly, always smiling even on the longest days. The family placed the flowers near the hangar where his plane used to be parked. The daughter reached up to touch one of the larger planes nearby, whispering, "You've seen Daddy before, haven't you?" Her innocence brought quiet tears to everyone's eyes. The mechanic then handed something to the wife, a small photo that had been printed the morning after the flight. It was a copy of that same picture, the one of him standing proudly beside his plane. The edges were slightly worn, but his smile was bright as ever. "He wanted this printed to hang at home," the mechanic said. "I never got the chance to give it to you." She held it close, her eyes trembling with emotion. It felt like a small piece of him had returned. Back home, the photo was placed beside the first one, both framed together. Seeing them side by side gave her a strange comfort, as if he was watching over them from both the past and the present. It became a daily part of their lives. The daughter began greeting the photos every morning before school. The grandparents made sure the candles were always lit before sunset. It wasn't about holding on to the pain anymore. It was about keeping his memory alive. But even as the family tried to move forward, the absence lingered. Nights were the hardest. His wife often woke up to the sound of the wind and imagined it was his plane returning. Sometimes she thought she heard his voice calling from another room. She knew it wasn't real, but in those quiet hours, she allowed herself to believe it for a moment. Belief, after all, was the only thing that helped her breathe. Months turned into a year. Seasons changed, but the feeling inside the house remained the same. The daughter grew taller, started school, and began to make new friends. Yet she still carried her father's photo in her backpack, telling her teacher proudly, "My dad is a pilot." The teacher, who knew the story, never corrected her. She simply smiled and said, "He must be very brave." The little girl would nod, her eyes sparkling. "He helps people. He'll come home when the clouds are ready." One afternoon, the wife was cleaning the living room when she came across a small notebook tucked inside one of the pilot's jackets. It was his flight logbook. She sat down and opened it carefully. Each page was filled with neat handwriting, details of flights, notes about weather, and small doodles of mountains and clouds. At the end of the last page, there was a short note written in his usual style. "If you're reading this, it means I'm somewhere above the clouds. Don't be sad. The sky is just another road, and I'll always find my way home." She pressed the book to her heart, tears flowing silently down her cheeks. It was as if he had known she would need those words someday. That night, she read the note to her daughter and parents. They all sat quietly for a long time after, listening to the gentle hum of wind outside. His father finally spoke, his voice trembling. He was always like this. Never feared the sky. He saw hope where others saw danger. His wife nodded, still staring at the book. "Maybe that's why people loved him," she said softly. "He made the sky feel safe." As months went on, the family learned to live with the emptiness in small ways. They visited the airport on his birthday, leaving paper planes instead of flowers. The daughter wrote tiny letters to her father and tied them to balloons, letting them drift into the sky. The grandparents started helping at a local flying club, sharing their son's story with young trainees who looked up to him as an example. The wife began volunteering at the community center, organizing donation drives in his memory. Though she still felt pain, she also felt proud. Her husband's kindness was still spreading, even without him here. But deep down, none of them expected what was coming. They didn't know that far away in the very mountains he had flown toward, a stranger would stumble upon something that would bring the family's world back to life. For now, they only had the photo, the smiling face of a man who loved the sky, and the hope that somehow he was still watching over them. Almost a year had passed since the pilot's plane went missing. The family had learned to live with the silence, though the pain never really left. The photo of him standing proudly beside his plane still sat on the living room table, framed with care, a candle burning softly beside it every evening. His wife had grown quieter, speaking less but feeling more. His daughter was older now, still carrying her father's picture in her school bag, still waving at every plane that crossed the sky. His parents had aged too. Grief had carved soft lines into their faces, but they kept their son's memory alive with quiet dignity. Life had become simple, almost too simple. The same routines, the same conversations, the same gentle ache that hung over every day. It was as if the world had stopped moving forward for them, even as everything else kept rushing on. But one afternoon, everything began to change. It was a cloudy day when someone knocked on their door. His wife opened it slowly, expecting a neighbor or a delivery man. Instead, she found a stranger standing there holding an old camera in his hands. He looked like a traveler, dust on his shoes, a heavy bag on his back, and the kind of tiredness in his eyes that comes from long journeys. He greeted her politely, asking if she was the pilot's wife. She nodded, unsure what to think. The man hesitated before speaking again. "I think I have something that belongs to you," he said softly. He stepped inside and placed the camera gently on the table. It was worn and scratched, but the initials carved on the side were unmistakable. Her breath caught. It was her husband's camera, the one he always carried on his flights. For a moment she couldn't speak. Her parents came closer, their faces pale with shock. The man explained that he had been hiking through the mountains a few weeks ago, near the same region where the pilot's plane had gone missing. The area was remote, covered in thick trees and rocky cliffs. While exploring a valley, he had stumbled upon some scattered metal pieces half buried in the dirt. Near those fragments, he found the camera, surprisingly intact. He said he almost left it there thinking it was just old junk, but curiosity made him take it with him. Later, when he cleaned it and checked the memory card, he realized what he had found. The photos inside told a story, one that needed to return home. The family gathered around the table, their hearts pounding as the traveler connected the camera to his laptop. The screen flickered to life, showing the first image, a familiar one. The pilot smiling beside his plane, the same photo they already had, but this time taken from a different angle. His wife pressed her hand to her mouth, tears already forming. The traveler clicked through the photos one by one. Each image showed the pilot during his final days before the flight, helping villagers unload boxes, shaking hands with children, standing beside a small mountain clinic. There were dozens of photos. Some captured sunsets over the peaks. Others showed smiling faces of people receiving food and medicine. The pilot had taken them all, documenting every bit of his mission with care. And in every picture he wore that same warm smile, the one his family remembered best. It was as if he had left behind pieces of himself through his camera. When they reached the last few photos, the room grew silent. The second-to-last picture showed the pilot standing on a rocky edge, the sky behind him painted gold by the evening sun. In his hand, he held the camera, pointing it toward the horizon. The final image was different. It showed the village from above, as if taken just before takeoff. There was calmness in the frame, a sense of peace that words couldn't describe. His wife began to cry quietly. His parents sat side by side, staring at the screen, speechless. Even the little girl, though she didn't fully understand, sensed the weight of the moment. The traveler didn't speak either. He just let them absorb it. When the slideshow ended, the room felt both full and empty at the same time. The traveler explained that after finding the camera, he had shown the photos to locals in nearby villages. One older man recognized the pilot right away. He said the pilot had come through just before the storm hit, bringing critical supplies. Because of that delivery, many sick villagers survived the harsh winter that followed. He saved lives that day, the traveler said softly. Everyone there still talks about him. The wife's tears turned from sorrow to something softer, something like pride. For so long, their story had been about loss. But now there was more to it. Her husband hadn't just vanished. He had made a difference right until the very end. His kindness had reached places they didn't even know about. The traveler handed her a small envelope. "Some of the villagers wanted you to have this," he said. Inside were handwritten letters and a few photographs. One showed a group of children holding a sign made of cloth that read, "Thank you, pilot." Behind them was the same mountain range, glowing under the sun. His daughter held the photo close, staring at the children's faces. "They knew my daddy," she whispered, smiling for the first time in weeks. That night after the traveler left, the family sat together around the old camera. They printed some of the photos, placing them gently on the table. The mother looked at them again and again as if afraid they would disappear. He wasn't alone, she said quietly. He was doing what he loved. Her father nodded, his eyes glassy. He gave his last day to help others. That's something to be proud of. The next morning, word spread across town. Neighbors visited, this time not to offer condolences, but to see the photos that had returned from the mountains. People who had once spoken about the tragedy now spoke about courage and kindness. The mechanic from the airport came too, holding back tears as he looked at the pictures. He always said the world looks better from above, he murmured. Maybe he was right. The wife decided to keep the camera on display beside the photo of him in his uniform. It no longer felt like a reminder of what she had lost, but of what he had left behind. Each picture was a piece of his story, proof that love and kindness can travel farther than any plane ever could. That night, she didn't light the candle out of sadness. She lit it out of gratitude. She whispered to the photo, "You're still helping people even now." The little girl sat beside her, holding one of the printed photos tightly. "Daddy's in the sky," she said softly, "and in these pictures too." Outside, a gentle breeze blew through the trees, rustling the curtains. It was as if the air itself carried his presence, a quiet, comforting reminder that he was never really gone. The family stayed up late, talking about him not with tears, but with smiles. For the first time in a long while, their hearts felt a little lighter. They didn't know it yet, but this was just the beginning. The photos had started something new, something that would soon reach even farther than they could imagine, turning their story of loss into one of hope and connection that would touch many more lives. The next few days felt different for the family. For the first time in months, there was something in their home that didn't feel heavy. The photos from the pilot's camera had brought a strange warmth back into their hearts. The little girl couldn't stop looking at them. She would sit by the table every evening, pointing at each picture and asking her mother to tell the story behind it again and again. Her mother didn't mind repeating it. In fact, every time she talked about her husband helping those villagers, it gave her strength. It made her feel like he was still doing good in the world, even if he wasn't physically here anymore. His parents, too, began to smile more often. They talked about how proud they were of him, how he always put others first. The old camera, now sitting on a shelf in the living room, became almost sacred to them. It wasn't just an object, it was a bridge between their grief and his memory. Every time they looked at it, they were reminded of his kindness and courage. A few days later, the traveler returned. He said the villagers wanted to meet the pilot's family in person. They wanted to thank them for what their son had done. At first, the family hesitated. The place was far away, deep in the mountains where the plane had gone missing. The journey would be long and tiring. But then the pilot's wife looked at her daughter and said softly, "Your father would want us to go." The little girl nodded eagerly. "I want to see where he helped the people," she said. That was all the reason they needed. A week later, they packed their bags and began the journey. The drive was long, winding through narrow mountain roads past rivers and cliffs. As they climbed higher, the air became cooler and thinner. The scenery was breathtaking. Tall trees, rolling hills, and sunlight slipping through clouds like golden threads. But beneath the beauty, the family felt something else too, a quiet anticipation, as if they were moving closer to a piece of their past. After many hours, they reached the small mountain village. It was peaceful and simple, surrounded by misty peaks. The villagers gathered as soon as they saw the visitors arriving. There were smiles, tears, and warm handshakes. They led the family to a small open area near a building that looked newly repaired. "This is the clinic he helped," one man explained. "The supplies he brought saved many lives. We never forgot him." The pilot's wife stood silently, her eyes glistening as she looked around. Children ran nearby, laughing. The same children from the photo the traveler had shown them. Some of them were now a bit older, but their faces were still full of life. One of the older women stepped forward holding a framed photo. It was the picture of the pilot standing beside the young boy with the medicine boxes, smiling in front of the same clinic. "We kept this," she said gently. "It reminds us of kindness." Hearing that, the pilot's mother began to cry quietly. She touched the photo with trembling hands. "He always wanted to help," she whispered. "I'm glad he made it here." The villagers gathered around, offering comfort and gratitude. One of them said, "Because of him, our people survived that winter. His flight was a gift to us." The villagers then took them to a small mural painted on the side of the clinic. It showed the pilot standing under the sky, holding his cap in one hand and smiling. Below it were the words, "He flew for hope." The artwork was simple but full of love. The pilot's daughter stared at it for a long time, then placed her small hand on the painted figure. "That's my daddy," she said softly. Everyone around her fell silent for a moment, touched by her innocent words. Later that evening, the family was invited to share dinner with the villagers. They sat around a fire, eating simple food and sharing stories. The villagers spoke about the day the pilot arrived, how he had helped unload boxes, joked with the children, and refused to rest until everything was delivered. They said he had promised to come back soon with more supplies. "He was smiling when he left," one man said. The sky looked calm then. None of us knew it would be the last time. Listening to those stories was both painful and healing for the family. Every word brought back the image of the man they loved, but now those memories carried pride instead of only sadness. His wife spoke softly after a while. "He used to say that the sky connects everyone." Maybe he was right. Even though he's gone, he brought all of us together. The villagers nodded in agreement. After dinner, the family stepped outside. The night sky above the mountains was clear and full of stars. The pilot's wife looked up and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. She whispered quietly, "We found you." Her daughter looked up too, pointing at a bright star and saying, "That one's him." Her grandmother smiled through her tears. "Maybe it is." Before they left the next day, the villagers gave the family a small gift, a framed copy of the mural and a letter written by the village elder. The letter said, "Your husband's kindness will always live here. When people walk into this clinic, they will see his face and remember that one man's courage can save many lives." The family hugged the villagers goodbye, promising to visit again. The drive back home felt different from the way there. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful. The family didn't speak much, but every now and then, the little girl would look out the window and say, "Daddy helped those people." Her mother would smile, holding her hand tightly. When they reached home, they placed the mural photo and the villager's letter beside the old camera and the pilot's photo. The corner of the living room that once felt like a shrine of loss now looked like a corner of celebration, a tribute to life, courage, and love. Visitors who came to their house noticed the change. The air felt lighter and even the candles' glow seemed brighter. Soon word about the story spread beyond their small town. A local newspaper published an article titled, "A Pilot's Final Flight Brings Hope to a Mountain Village." People who read it were moved. Messages of support and admiration began arriving from different places. Some said they were inspired to help others in their own communities. Others wrote that they finally understood the meaning of true kindness after hearing about the pilot's story. The family read every message carefully, their hearts full. The pilot's wife realized something beautiful. The story wasn't just theirs anymore. It belonged to everyone who believed that love and courage could outlast even loss. She often sat beside the photo now, not to grieve but to thank him. "You're still helping people," she would whisper, just in a different way. The little girl started writing small notes to her father again, but now they were full of happy things. "The flowers are growing in our garden," she wrote one day. "Mom smiles more now. I think you'd be proud." She placed the notes beside his photo every night, believing that somehow he could still see them. As days passed, the home slowly filled with laughter again. It wasn't the same as before, but it was real. The pilot's parents began gardening together. His wife took up painting and often drew scenes of the sky. The daughter started saying she wanted to be a pilot too, just like Daddy. Every time she said that, her mother would smile with a mix of love and pride. "Then you'll fly for kindness," she'd reply. That's what he did. The family had gone from grieving in silence to living with purpose. The photo, the camera, and the letters were no longer reminders of loss. They were reminders of how far love can travel, and somewhere, in the gentle whisper of the wind or the distant sound of an airplane passing overhead, they still felt him, watching, smiling, proud. The morning air was soft and quiet when the family finally decided to visit the small village that had changed everything. It had been months since the travelers' visit, and life at home had slowly started to find a rhythm again. The pilot's wife still kept his photo near the window, where the sunlight touched it every morning. His parents often sat near it, sharing gentle stories about the past. And his daughter, a little older now, liked to talk to the picture before bedtime, telling her father about her day. When the invitation came from the people in the village, the family knew it was time. They packed a few things, including the photo that had become so precious, and made the long journey by bus and then by car through winding roads. The mountains stood tall, almost touching the clouds, and the narrow paths reminded them of the same journey the pilot had taken that final day. As the car rolled into the village, the family was surprised to see how peaceful and alive it looked. Children were playing outside, women carried baskets of fruit, and laughter filled the air. The village that had once struggled for medicine and supplies now had a small clinic, standing proudly in the center. On one of the outer walls was a colorful mural of a man in a pilot's jacket, smiling with the sky behind him. It was the same smile from the photo they carried. The moment the family stepped out, a group of villagers came forward to greet them. They spoke with warmth and gratitude, their eyes filled with respect. One of the elders explained how the pilot's final mission had helped them survive during a difficult time. The supplies he had delivered had saved lives. They had not forgotten him, and the mural was their way of keeping his kindness alive. The pilot's wife couldn't stop her tears. She ran her fingers over the painted image, tracing the familiar lines of his face. His parents stood quietly beside her, holding each other's hands. His daughter, clutching a small paper airplane she had made, looked up at the mural and whispered softly, "For you, Dad." The villagers invited them to visit the clinic. Inside, it was clean and bright. The walls were decorated with photos of the pilot handing out supplies, helping children, and smiling with the villagers. Each picture carried a story, a memory that had crossed mountains to return to his family. The family walked slowly through the building, feeling as if they were walking through a part of his soul that had been left behind to do good. A young nurse, who had been a child during that time, came forward and told them how the pilot had comforted the sick and shared stories to make everyone smile. "He told us that kindness can fly farther than any plane," she said softly. Her words made the wife's heart tremble. She realized her husband's legacy wasn't just in his flying, it was in the lives he touched. The family spent the whole day with the villagers. They were served a simple meal cooked with love, and as evening fell, the sky turned gold and purple. The daughter sat near the mural again, folding more paper airplanes from a small notebook she carried. She placed them in a line at the base of the wall, as if creating a runway for her father to take off once more. The villagers watched quietly, moved by the child's innocence. Later that night, as they sat by the fire, the pilot's parents spoke for the first time about their son without tears. They smiled, remembering his childhood, how he used to run to the fields pretending his arms were wings. The villagers listened with deep respect. It felt as if the man they had all lost was still there among them, smiling through the flames of the firelight. Before they left the next morning, the village elder handed the family a framed copy of the mural photo. "He is part of our story now," the elder said, "and all of you are part of ours." The pilot's wife hugged the elder tightly, thanking them for keeping his memory alive in such a beautiful way. On the journey back home, the family was quiet, but peaceful. The daughter looked out of the window, watching birds glide through the open sky. "Do you think he's flying with them, Mama?" she asked. Her mother smiled gently and replied, "Yes, I think he never stopped flying." Back home, the family placed the framed mural photo beside the original one. The two pictures together told a story of loss, love, and hope. The pain was still there, but it no longer felt heavy. It had turned into something softer, something that inspired them to live with the same kindness the pilot had shown. Over the next months, the family began visiting local schools, sharing the story of the pilot and the village. They spoke about compassion, courage, and the power of one person's actions. The pilot's daughter, shy at first, started helping her mother tell the story. Her voice would tremble a little when she said her father's name, but her eyes would always shine when she talked about his photo. People who heard the story often said it gave them hope, that it reminded them goodness still exists in the world. The family started receiving letters from strangers who said they had been touched by the story, inspired to help others in small ways. It felt like the pilot's spirit had found a new way to keep flying. through the kindness spreading from one heart to another. One evening, as the sun set behind their home, the wife stood by the window where the photo was kept. She watched the fading light touch her husband's face in the picture. Giving it a warm, golden glow, she whispered quietly, "You did it. You're still helping people." She felt a calm peace she hadn't felt in years. The daughter came running in with a small paper airplane in her hand. "Let's fly it for Dad," she said excitedly. They went outside and the little girl tossed it into the air. The breeze caught it gently and carried it upward higher and higher, until it disappeared into the glowing sky. They watched it go, their hearts full of both love and peace. That night, as the stars appeared one by one, the family sat together, talking softly about how their lives had changed. The pain of losing him would never fully go away, but now it lived beside something stronger: pride, love, and the comfort of knowing that even in his final moments, he had done something beautiful. The photo that had once been a symbol of grief had turned into a light that guided not only them, but many others. The story of the pilot spread beyond their small town. A journalist wrote about it, and soon people from different countries sent messages of support. A small foundation was created in the pilot's name to provide medical supplies to remote areas. His wife became part of the team, helping organize missions similar to the one he had flown. Each time a plane took off, she felt as if he were flying with them, watching over the skies he loved so much. Years later, when the daughter grew up, she decided to become a pilot too. She said she wanted to see the world from the same view her father had loved. On the day of her first flight, her mother handed her the same photo, the one that had carried them through everything. "Take him with you," she said. The young woman smiled, placed the photo in her pocket, and whispered, "I will." As the plane took off, the sky was bright and clear, the same kind of morning her father had loved. And somewhere above the clouds, it felt as if two flights crossed paths, one from the past, one from the future, both carrying the same message: that love never truly ends. It only changes form. The family's story became a reminder to everyone who heard it, that even in the darkest moments, something beautiful can rise. Sometimes all it takes is a single photo, a single act of kindness to keep hope alive and to help others find their way back to the light.